my word. You should have gone for the head.
Because no matter how much you claim to love me, you can never have a frost giant sitting on the throne of Asgard.
No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
I have been marked once, my dear, and let me assure you, no needle shall ever touch my skin again.
That's what makes you dangerous. It's not the mask. It's not the skills.
Midnight Man is an arch-nemesis of Moon Knight, well known by dedicated fans. He is the father of Midnight, aka Jeff Wild, who would go on to become Moon Knight's sidekick before becoming a villain himself. Midnight Man is Anton Mogart, who was given his mantle due to him stealing priceless valuables and works of art, committing the thefts at exactly midnight. He did not possess any superpowers, but was already himself a wealthy man, who stole simply because he wanted to and enjoyed the thrill. Eventually, he ended up being defeated and stopped by Moon Knight. As a result of their fight, he became disfigured, lost his fortune, and became kinda deranged, collecting garbage in the place of valuables. He teamed up with Raoul Bushman to try and defeat Moon Knight, but of course, failed. When he discovered he had terminal cancer, he faced off with Moon Knight one final time, but once again lost and died in the process. While just a man, he was an extremely gifted thief and skilled combatant. A man who had acquired Mark Spector's Khonshu statue after he decided to give up being Moon Knight and sell it so he could settle down with Marlene. Aziz was actually believed to be the reincarnation of a Ramses, the ancient priest of Anubis. He sought to rule the world by becoming basically Anubis incarnate, and acquiring the statue was all part of his plan. He also attempted to eliminate Khonshu's agent on Earth, Mark Spector, but failed. Spector was then drawn back into becoming Moon Knight after Khonshu and his priests prepared him for battle, sensing that the statue had fallen into evil hands. Anubis the Jackal almost succeeded in defeating Moon Knight, but he survived their attempt to sacrifice him. In the end, Aziz was believed to have been killed when a freak sandstorm caused the temple he had built to collapse. Aziz wasn't a super long-lasting villain, but if he had succeeded in his plot, which almost happened mind you, he likely would have been one of the most powerful villains that Moon Knight had ever encountered. Number 8. Black Spectre. Black Spectre is like the reverse of Moon Knight. Carson Knowles is a man whose trauma turned him into a villain rather than giving him a dissociative identity disorder and turning him into a hero. He was a soldier who returned from war underappreciated for his service. His job was gone, his wife had left him, and his son sadly ended up dead. Knowles blamed the city for what happened to him and used his influence and his connections to run for mayor, with sinister plans for the city once he was elected into office. When he wasn't focused on gaining the mayoral seat, he acted as the villain Black Spectre. Black Spectre was just a man, of course, but was cunning, military trained, and did look really badass. Whereas Moon Knight dressed all in white and was a hero, Black Spectre dressed all in black and acted as his antithesis. During a fight with Moon Knight, Black Spectre was seemingly killed when Mark had no other option when it came to how to stop him, causing him to fall to his death. Number 7. Mummified. Well, I mean, not fully mummified, organs still intact, but wrapped up like a mummy and the prisoner of Anubis for sure. This frightening moment comes from when Mark Spector had reluctantly answered the call of Khonshu once more after choosing to retire. Coming out of retirement, he felt compelled to follow an urge, almost like a telepathic pull, which led him to priests of Khonshu, who armed him for the coming battles after Mark had sworn off being Moon Knight and sold his Khonshu idol statue. This puts him into direct conflict with Anubis, who literally had him confined in mummy wrap as he threatened to blast him with laser-like eyes, defeating Khonshu's avatar and killing Mark Spector in the process. At least, that was his plan. Fortunately, Mark did escape with some help from Khonshu, but unfortunately this also meant that Mark was now indebted to Khonshu once more. Number 6. Ernst. Ernst is one of Moon Knight's oldest villains when it comes to his in-canon history. When Mark was still a child, he discovered a dark truth about Ernst, who he knew at the time as Rabbi Yitz Perlman, a close friend of his family. The truth was that Perlman was not who he claimed to be, but actually a World War II soldier deserter who had fought for Germany named Ernst, and was basically posing as Perlman. Ernst wasn't just someone with a past, he was also a compulsive serial killer who believed that killing kinda helped him to preserve his life force energy and attain a level of immortality. He would go on to start a society known as the Society of Sadiq, a society of sadists who believed in Ernst's own ideologies. After escaping Mark when he was just a child, Ernst knew that eventually their paths would cross again in the future. Following Mark's life, Ernst saw in him great potential and intended to make him his heir. While successfully trapped and forced to take part in trials to prime him for acceptance to the Societe, Mark ultimately rejected Ernst. After being forced to roam the city with him as a final gambit to ensure that Mark became what Ernst intended, Mark fought even harder against Ernst's influence, ultimately reaching out to his other personalities and killing him. Well, his other personalities kind of killed him, but that's still Mark, so it's complicated. But basically Mark was the one to kill him still, if that makes sense.
Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Knight. Shadow Knight's real name is Randall Spector, Mark's younger brother. He was envious of Mark his entire life, which turned him into a horrible criminal. There was a murderer on the streets killing nurses called the Hatchet Man, so Moon Knight used his girlfriend Marlene as like bait to catch the killer. The plan worked, but Marlene perished. Yeah, and to make matters even worse, the Hatchet Man was revealed to be Randall. Randall later joined the cult of Khonshu, which ultimately resulted in him receiving the same powers as his brother Mark. However, he ended up choosing to use them for evil, donning the pseudonym Shadow Knight. Because, you know, every character needs to have a reverse version of themselves. Reverse Flash, Dark Archer, Bizarro. It was devastating for Mark to fight his brother and ultimately kill him by slitting his throat with a throwing crescent. Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, especially when you learn that Mark tried protecting Randall their entire lives. But then again, he killed your girlfriend, so...
Number 4, Taskmaster. Everyone knows that Anthony Masters is insane when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. He has photographic reflexes, which allow him to learn any fight move or style just by basically observing or battling against someone, which makes him pretty hard to beat if you don't have the same kind of crazy superpower set. While Moon Knight doesn't have any crazy superpowers, but he does have a Batman-like ability to strike fear into the hearts of almost all of his opponents, no matter how skilled they are. And it is in using this tactic that he is able to defeat Taskmaster. You could also consider that these two fighting at night would give Moon Knight a bit of a leg up, as it is also believed that Moon Knight becomes stronger at night due to his connection to Khonshu. He's also kind of immortal due to his connection to Khonshu, but on paper he's still kind of a guy. Also, if it's a full moon, he gets even more powerful, and that night when they fought, it was a full moon, so this is Moon Knight at his most powerful, in theory.
Getting close to the end in number 3, Seth Falcon. He belongs to a Scottish sect of Knights Templar and has several amazing powers. I'll never do that accent again. Falcon first appeared in Mark Spector Moon Knight number 43. Seth Falcon is immortal, has superhuman strength and stamina, but his strongest power is his touch. Using his clawed fingers, Falcon can drain the life force out of any living being, aging them in the process. If he holds his grip for long enough, Seth can drain the entire life out of somebody, all of it, turning them into a rotted skeleton. However, there's a catch. Due to biofeedback, the draining process backfires if Seth uses it on anybody who shares his DNA code, even partially. Simply put, he can't drain his relatives because it causes the series of issues that then hurts and weakens his powers. And yep, that's right. You guessed it, of course, Moon Knight turns out to be one of his long-lost relatives, so Falcon has to rely on his superhuman strength and stamina to outlast Mark Spector in any mutual fight, which is good, because that kind of like levels the playing field.
Number 2, Mephisto. More recently in the comics, Mephisto has become a villain to both Mark Spector's Moon Knight and his god Khonshu. Khonshu was the one to alert Moon Knight of this rising threat and help him to prepare for the coming fight, which we see in Age of Khonshu. Considering that Mephisto is basically on a god tier level, being not quite a god and not quite the devil, but definitely Marvel's equivalent, one of Marvel's equivalents anyways, I think we can consider him to be pretty powerful. There isn't much Mephisto can't do so long as he can manage to play by his own rules. Really, his only weakness is that he kind of needs to get his victim to agree to some kind of like contractual obligation in order to be able to really have power over them. Of course, Mephisto often has the ability to give or do exactly what his victims need, which is often what makes him such a dangerous and powerful villain. There's a lot of times people are tempted to make deals because Mephisto's like, I got everything you need over here, just make a deal with me, it won't go wrong. It goes wrong every time, but this time it's gonna go right for you, my friend. Number 1. Khonshu. In the end, Khonshu and Moon Knight successfully defeated Mephisto, but the battle unfortunately did not stop there. Once Mephisto was defeated, a greater threat rose up in his place. The very person or entity that had seemingly been trying to help Moon Knight defeat Mephisto in order to save the world from his villainy. Khonshu. Khonshu decided that now that hell was kind of open for vacancy, he would take over and also kind of turn the world into a Egyptian afterlife hell thing. And that was when Moon Knight realized that his god had completely lost it. Teaming up with the Avengers, who he himself had previously fought to defeat in order to arm himself for the fight against Mephisto, Moon Knight ended up defeating Khonshu. Now godless, Mark Spector is still Moon Knight, but is only guided by his own moral compass and ideology, instead of Khonshu influencing him and his decisions. Number 10. Decay. Decay was a nemesis created for Wonder Woman by Phobos, Ares' son. While Wonder Woman attempted to foil Ares' schemes, Phobos saw the opportunity to win his father's favor by destroying Diana. He ventured to the Cavern of the Gorgons and, using the magical properties and matter of the Gorgon's heart, created a villain in its image, much like Diana herself had been created. He sent the fiend called Decay to Wonder Woman, and the two fought one another. While Decay proved a formidable foe, almost defeating Wonder Woman, in the end it was Diana's lasso of truth that ended the being. Due to the lasso's ties to Gaia and life, it overwhelmed Decay, who was born of death, with its life-infused energy until Decay exploded, reduced once more to the dust form from whence she came. Number 9. Mavis. Yep, just Mavis. Mavis was the villain in the third and final story featured in Wonder Woman issue 4 from the original run of the series. In issue 4, she was the former slave of the then reformed Paula von Gunther. Once freed, however, Mavis did not want to be reformed on Reform Island like the other girls. No, I'm not kidding. Reform Island is a smaller island that is part of Themyscira, later referred to as Transformation Island. Instead, Mavis plotted to get revenge on her former mistress. She kidnapped Paula's daughter Greta and attempted to persuade Paula to once again join the German World War II forces, resuming her villainous work. Fortunately, Wonder Woman rescues Gerda, apprehends Mavis, and saves the day. Number 8. Professor Menace. While Professor Menace has also appeared in the DC animated universe, people might not be as familiar with him when it comes to the comics. He only appeared in a handful of issues there. He makes an appearance in the good old original run of Wonder Woman in issue 111, where he attempts to replace Wonder Woman with a robotic duplicate. Known to Diana as simply the Robot Master, he challenges her to a competition to prove that his robotic duplicate is in fact better than even she herself. Wonder Woman accepts the challenge, but the competition is rigged in the robot's favor. Defeated, she agrees, as previously decided, should she lose, to go into retirement. It is then revealed that Robot Master is actually the insidious Dr. Menace, a supervillain. Not content with simply convincing Wonder Woman to retire, he sends the robot after her. I think this is really where he messed up and made a bad choice. Wonder Woman uses an eel to short-circuit her robotic counterpart, defeating Dr. Menace. That's very resourceful, Wonder Woman, using an eel. Number 7. Osyra. During the time of ancient Egypt, Osyra arrived on planet Earth. She was an alien from another galaxy with insane telepathic powers. During her time in Egypt, she used her powers to rule over the people there, becoming their queen, with her consort becoming their king. Eventually, the people of Egypt rebelled against her, sealing her up in a pyramid. Years later, during World War II, she was accidentally freed from her tomb. She attempted to use her telepathic power to bring peace and end World War II through influencing the minds of those fighting. Actually a pretty noble cause, but Wonder Woman and the Justice Society of America weren't going to let Osyra control people, even if it was for the purpose of peace. Wonder Woman defeated Osyra by using Starman's gravity rod to break her telepathic hold, and basically defeated her by convincing Osyra of the importance of free will above even peace. Since her first appearance in that two-story arc in Wonder Woman Volume 1, issue 231 and 232, Osyra has made a few more appearances, mostly reappearing as an antagonist in Wonder Woman Giant Size issues. Number 6. Armageddon. Armageddon is actually a legacy villain, but despite the fact that there have been multiple Armageddons, it's still likely not a name that most people would be super familiar with. Originally, Armageddon fought alongside Germany during World War II on the side of the Axis. He was first introduced in the 1970s in issue 234 of the original Wonder Woman comic. Despite not having any specific superpowers, he was still considered to be a relatively strong foe, skilled in using many different types of weapons. His son and his granddaughter thereafter would also end up taking the villainous mantle of Armageddon, explaining his strength and theirs as coming from being descended from the mythical beings known as ogres. With Armageddon the third first appearing in Wonder Woman Legacy numbered issue 753 earlier this year. Number 5. Angleman. You may have forgotten about Angleman and his angler, but don't worry, we won't let you forget. Angleman has never been considered an A-list villain, likely because he is such a ridiculous name, although it does begin with an A, oddly enough. And he often fights with what looks like some kind of protractor. But his angler, as it's known, is actually a very powerful piece of equipment which can be used to manipulate space and time, although I'm sure it could also be used as a ruler or to help measure angles in a pinch. Multi-purpose. Since his introduction as Angelo Bend, a brilliant and often technologically capable criminal who sometimes dressed up as a stage magician, he has been rebooted and is now known for also being Vandal Savage's son. Number 4. Darren O. Donna Troy's origins are always an interesting and kind of ever-changing story, as each DC reboot seems to revamp the origins of where the original Wonder Girl came from. During the Wonder Woman series that started in 2011, the story once again got a refresh of sorts when Darren O was introduced. Darren O was the lover of Hippolyta, who was turned into an old crone, drained of all her youth and beauty, and ended up deciding instead to live out her days mostly in seclusion. When she learned that Hippolyta had a child with Zeus, the baby that would one day grow up to become Wonder Woman, she set out to make a better heir for the people of Themyscira. Thus, Donna Troy was created. Darren O helped Donna to vie for the throne, and the two almost succeeded in usurping Wonder Woman's position as inheritor. Fortunately, Wonder Woman defeated Donna and managed to sway her into becoming her ally, using the power of truth. Darren O attempted to kill Wonder Woman for this, but was stopped by the other Amazons. Number 3. The Children of Ares. Ares has a lot of children, and most of them have beef with Diana, but this group of them were specifically known as the Children of Ares, and aren't any of the main bigger ones that you might have heard of before. They are a team of children and villains created by Gail Simone and Bernard Chang, who first appeared in the 2006 run of Wonder Woman in issue 39. They were only around for a few issues but were sired by Ares, who magically impregnated Amazonian women. These children use their mind, control abilities, and manipulation skills to discredit Diana, tarnishing her reputation as a hero and as Wonder Woman. Number 2. Deimos. Deimos is known for being another one of the Children of Ares, separate from the previous group of 5 we just discussed. He first appeared in the original run of Wonder Woman in issue 183. He is the twin brother of Phobos, who created Decay. Together, these brothers attempted to battle Diana after Phobos' plan of using Decay failed. Deimos planned to poison Wonder Woman in battle with his snake-like hair, which infected those it touched with a fear-inducing toxin. In the end, however, Wonder Woman beat him by decapitating him with her often underused tiara. That thing is sharp. Number 1. Villainy Incorporated. Villainy Incorporated was a group of women who were former villains of Wonder Woman's trapped together on Transformation Island, also known as Reform Island, as we talked about before. They ended up teaming up in order to escape their dismal fate in issue number 28 of the 1942 Wonder Woman series. Together they managed to capture and overpower Wonder Woman, but as they tried to escape, Wonder Woman managed to break her bonds and recapture the rebellious prisoners. While you may recognize some of the villains on the Villainy Inc. team, not all are easily recognizable. You might know Cheetah or Dr. Poison or even Giganta, but how about Blue Snowman, Hypnotic Woman, Queen Clea, Zara, or one of my favorites, Evil S? Pretty sure Evil S was also the leader of that team.
In at 10, Werewolf by Night. The first time we've seen Moon Knight in the comics actually wasn't in his own series, but rather Werewolf by Night number 32. He faced off against Jack Russoff, aka Werewolf by Night, making Russoff his enemy. However, technically, Moon Knight was the villain in this scenario, hence its placement at number 10. Jacob Russoff is a werewolf, but unlike his dad, also a werewolf, Jack could control when and where he would transform, not just under a full moon. He had much more control over his abilities in werewolf form as well, except for when there was a full moon, because that's when Jack would be at his strongest but also completely out of control, which is a concept that sounds a lot like a D&D character. His superpowers include werewolf physiology along with superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, stamina, a healing factor, and of course a hairy body packed with a nasty set of teeth and killer claws, something the ladies love. In at 9, Morpheus. Morpheus first appeared in Moon Knight number 12 back in the early 80s, and he's one of the rare horrifying characters that people actually feel sympathy for. Despite his vampiric appearance, he should not be mistaken for Morbius. This is a different person. The character who's getting the standalone movie, no one knows what universe it's in. Yeah, Morbius is indeed a pseudo-vampire, while Morpheus is something else entirely. His real name is Robert Markham, and he got sick from an old virus that caused segments of his DNA to be inhibited by the virus. He sought medical attention and Dr. Peter Alron gave him an untested drug to help him, but it all backfired, causing Markham to change dramatically appearance-wise while also taking away Markham's need for sleep and giving him unfathomable psionic powers. However, the lack of sleep rendered him crazy, after which he had taken the alias Morpheus after the Olympian god of dreams. With his newfound powers, Morpheus sought revenge upon Alron, only to encounter Moon Knight in the process. And it ain't Count Nefaria. While Count Nefaria wasn't purely evil at first, his desire for more wealth and power is ultimately his downfall, and he's very nefarious. He has been around for years and years, fighting almost every single Avenger he can think of. He also encountered Moon Knight after Mark Spector moved to LA and joined the West Coast Avengers, primarily becoming his villain. Count Nefaria is immortal and has an unfathomably strong healing factor, because, you know, he's immortal. He received energy projection from the Living Laser, strength from Power Man, and speed from Whirlwind, all amplified 100 times. He can lift well over 100 tons, fly over 5,000 miles per hour, teleport, leech another person's energy, and so much more. However, it's likely that if you are a fan of Moon Knight, you knew about this guy, so he's not very high on the list. But honestly, not having known much about Moon Knight before this list, aside from he looks frickin' awesome, all these villains are pretty new to me, so it's pretty cool getting to see all the characters that this guy has faced, and hopefully you at least hear about a few that you didn't know about. But no complaining if you're a Moon Knight superfan, okay? That's not allowed. That's cheating.
Number 7. Raoul Bushman. Bushman might not be the most powerful villain on this list, but he's definitely a meaningful one for Moon Knight. And despite not being an A-list villain by Marvel Comics villain standards, he would definitely make the A-list in Mark Spector's book. Bushman was one of the first major villains Mark came up against at a time where he was basically transitioning into becoming Moon Knight, or to develop his Moon Knight persona, depending on which way you want to look at that. Bushman was the one who basically killed Mark initially, which led him to being revived by Khonshu and ultimately becoming an avatar for the god. Although Khonshu would later be retconned to have made appearances earlier on in Mark's life as well. One of the most brutal defeats that Bushman suffered was at the hands of Moon Knight when he used one of his crescent darts to literally carve Bushman's face off. You can say what you want about edgelord Moon Knight, who surfaces in the 2006 Moon Knight series, but this still remains a favorite moment among many Moon Knight fans, myself included, despite being part of a somewhat controversial period in terms of how the character was written. At least for me, I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of people that love the 2006 series all throughout, and if you do, that's fine too.
And at 6, Black Spectre. Carson Knowles was a veteran who returned home without applause. His job had been passed on and his wife left him with their son. He barely got by as a delivery man and found out his son was killed by phone. After his car was stripped for parts and a mugger accosted him, Knowles snapped and beat the man nearly to death. Seeking to destroy the city that treated him so badly, Carson Knowles ran as a dark horse candidate for mayor on his father's name and political connections. He also created a second identity as Black Spectre, beating and blackmailing the local precinct boss to support Knowles, and then in a fight with Moon Knight his mask slipped, but Moon Knight was unable to convince anyone that the mayoral candidate Knowles and Black Spectre were the same person. Eventually though, Moon Knight defeated Black Spectre in public and his assistant Marlene Arlone uncovered Knowles' corrupt plans for the city and his political office, so at least he lost.
Number 5. Daddy Khonshu. One of the creepiest visits I think Mark has gotten from Khonshu is still the first one, especially as this visit only highlights the fact that we're not really sure at this point if Khonshu is completely real or simply a manifestation of Mark's psyche, like his other identities. Khonshu first visited Mark when he was just a boy, and his father was meeting with a specialist about getting Mark treatment for his dissociative identity disorder, which Elias had noticed manifesting through Mark talking to seemingly imaginary friends. Makes me actually wonder if that is a sign of DID or not. I had a lot of imaginary friends when I was a kid, and is having imaginary friends an early sign of the potential to develop something like DID? I had like 3 or 4 of them growing up myself. As Mark listens to the door to hear what his father and the doctor are saying to one another, he's approached by someone who turns out to be Khonshu. Khonshu doesn't just say hi or even boo, but instead disturbingly claims that he is Mark's true father. Oh boy.
And at 4, Midnight Man. Originally a collector of art, Anton Mogart would commit robberies at the stroke of midnight to build his collection. When Moon Knight stops him, he seemingly drowns in a river, but instead, he ends up becoming deformed by the waste found within the sewers. Then he goes insane and starts collecting trash, and teams with Bushman to defeat their sworn enemy. When Midnight Man finds out he's dying from cancer, he decides to find his son, hoping that he can share some of his final moments with him. Mogart does what he can to stop his son from turning to a life of crime like he once did, and in the wake of his death, he becomes the hero Midnight. It didn't last, and he ended up becoming a cyborg for the Secret Empire, which, while sounding bad, I think it would be kinda cool, like, to be a cyborg. Like, as long as I still have, like, my free will, and my programming isn't controlling me, because that just doesn't sound like fun. Like, I want to be able to turn my arm into a giant cannon. That'd be great. Someone tries to mug me, I'm just like, sorry.
Number 3, the Hatchet Man. Being that Moon Knight is such a dark figure himself, he also faces off against a lot of dark and violent rogues. Very similar to Batman, actually. Dealing with a lot of criminals who are much more twisted, dark, and brutal. One such villain was the Hatchet Man, who initially Mark believed was none other than Randall Spector, his own brother. In fact, when the Hatchet Man is defeated in issue 18 of the 1978 Hulk series, Mark is pretty convinced that it was his brother. Of course, I'm pretty sure his brother shows up later alive, so I'm not really sure if this was actually true or just a coincidence or how this fits into the greater continuity. Either way, before he is defeated, the Hatchet Man's MO was using an axe, a hatchet, to slay innocent nurses as they headed home later after their night shifts. And the reason Randall was suspected as the Hatchet Man by Moon Knight was because of a past incident where he killed a woman named Lisa with a meat cleaver, which Mark himself recalled. Axe-wielding serial killers, that is some scary stuff. It should also be noted that Marlene, Mark's love interest, is used as bait in the plan, and when everything goes sideways, she ends up hacked multiple times with the axe, putting her in a life-threatening condition.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Cactus. Sometimes a name is just a name. It can have meaning, or it could just be something cool that the guy thought of that ended up kind of making sense. Other times names are extremely direct and are probably too on point. That's the case with Cactus, who is exactly what he sounds like and nothing more. Created by Dominus, he's been a villain of the West Coast Avengers and Moon Knight on various occasions. Punching him definitely stings, but beyond that, it doesn't take all that much to break him or chop him up, because, you know, he's a cactus, which has actually happened before, though he can regenerate lost limbs, which I don't know if cactuses can do or cacti can do, but yeah, he's without a doubt one of the lamest villains in the Marvel Universe, but in my opinion, that makes him one of the coolest. This guy is literally a cactus, and that's hilarious. A couple years ago, the girl I was with at the time and I came up with a superhero that we called Cact Guy, who was basically in essence Cactus, and we didn't know that it was actually a thing. But it's funny to me that someone actually made this and then put it in the goddamn Marvel Universe. That's hilarious. That's amazing. And Cactus is my new favorite villain ever because of that. Hashtag Cactus in the MCU. And finally, in at number 1, Hunter's Moon. Dr. Batter was born in Luxor, Egypt to 2 doctors and was an excellent student throughout his life, eventually becoming a doctor as well. He grew to become a very rational and serious person who didn't believe in any higher entities, despite still attending prayer and studying the Quran and the Hadith. This all changed when he was attacked by vampires and left to die on the streets, at which point he met the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. Dr. Batter survived and became a worshipper of Khonshu, who fancied himself the god's second highest priest, and opposite of Mark Spector. After learning that Moon Knight had taken in vampires under his protection, Dr. Batter terrorized the Nightwalkers to get his attention. Hunter's Moon eventually confronted Moon Knight, chastised him for taking in enemies of Khonshu, and expressed his intentions to correct him. Dr. Batter beat Moon Knight and invaded the Midnight Mission to kill the vampires, but Spector recovered and knocked him unconscious after attacking him from behind. Which, you know what, after beating him, I'm not even gonna call it, that's kinda shady. I respect it.
Number 10, Black Spider. When Eric Needham was a young lad, he unfortunately became addicted to drugs and turned to a life of crime in order to fuel that addiction. He raided and robbed his father's liquor store and actually killed his old man in the process, which landed him in jail, where he kicked that nasty drug habit and took up a life of fighting the war on drugs. Running a costume, he became a self-styled vigilante and began killing those suspected of dealing any sort of drugs. Now in his mind, Batman and him had a common enemy and they should have been allies, but the Dark Knight thought differently due to Needham's tendency to, you know, kill. Batman interfered with his plans many times, and that led to Needham turning to a life of crime instead, teaming up with some of the other villains in order to get revenge on Batman. During his crusade, Needham's wife and son were killed by a drug lord who had discovered the Black Spider's identity, and in a rage, the Spider prepared for one final assault. After being shot multiple times, Needham invaded the drug lord's headquarters and detonated explosives strapped to his back, killing the drug dealers in the process. Give his story a read for yourself, starting with 1976's Detective Comics number 463. Number 9. Mr. Bloom. The concept of darkness is one that is intrinsically tied to Batman. I mean, everyone should come to expect it from a character referred to as the Dark Knight. So it only makes sense to put the character up against the opposite of darkness, light, and that is where Mr. Bloom comes to play. His past, as well as his motives, remain a mystery to this day, but in no way does that mean he didn't leave a huge impact on Gotham City. With the ability to bestow powers onto any other human being at the cost of shortening that individual's life, Mr. Bloom provided these quote-unquote seeds to a select few, and crime blossomed and grew like a weed from the lowest reaches of Gotham City. Not only could he bestow powers onto others through his seeds though, he also had some powers of his own, including mechakinesis, pyrokinesis, cryokinesis, science alteration, and of course, superhuman strength and agility. Check him out for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 2015's Batman Volume 2, all the way until his death in 2016's Batman Volume 2, number 50. Number 8. The Black and White Bandit. Once a successful artist, Roscoe Chiara was commissioned to paint a portrait of Winsor Munzell, the head of a chemical corporation. His company had created some new pigments specifically for painting, however, Chiara did not know that the paints were untested, and began to have these serious headaches. On the final end of painting, Chiara fell asleep and awoke to a colorless sunrise, because he had gone completely colorblind as a result of the pigments. To get his revenge, he became the Black and White Bandit and began a campaign against Munzell, stealing various pieces of art from his collection and his museum. He doesn't have any powers per se, but he is a master of disguise, as he has been seen as a blind man and a nun, and he is also a getaway master thanks to his zebra. It didn't take long for Batman to catch wind of what was going on, and after 2 encounters, he defeated the Black and White Bandit with only a false advertisement and just a punch to the nose. He hasn't really been seen since, but it's presumed that he is reformed or he's either still in jail. We're not 100% sure. Check him out in 2001's Batman Gotham Knights, number 12. Number 7. Amygdala. Prone to fits of homicidal rage, Aaron Helsinger was put in the care of Arkham Asylum and had his amygdala cluster removed, in hopes of curing his psychotic episodes. It actually ended up doing the exact opposite though, and Aaron became even more angry than before. During his time at Arkham, Aaron became a pawn of Jeremiah Arkham and was used to attack Batman many times to try and break his spirits, but you know, it's Batman, so that didn't really happen. A short time later, Bane orchestrated a massive breakout at Arkham Asylum, and all of the patients, including Amygdala, were freed, and he teamed up with the Ventriloquist to wreak some havoc on Gotham City. It didn't take long for Batman to take down Amygdala and arrest him, sending him to Blackgate Penitentiary, where he became the star member of the prison softball team. He was eventually released and actually lived in the same apartment building as Dick Grayson for a while, all until Blockbuster blew up the entire apartment complex. Check out Amygdala for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1992's Batman Shadow of the Bat, number 3. Number 6. Merrymaker. Dr. Byron Meredith was a crazed doctor that worked at Arkham Asylum who used pretty interesting methods to treat and rehabilitate his patients, his favorite being torture. Byron was one of the few doctors who could actually tolerate the Joker, and he ended up becoming obsessed with him and just studied him endlessly until he was fired and went into a solo practice. Eventually creating the costume for the Merrymaker, Meredith created that role so that he could lead his 4 new Joker-obsessed patients into a life of crime. Meredith's plan was to create this uncanny society so that the 4 would do his bidding. While the Joker-themed criminals attacked civilians, Meredith would sneak into a nearby building where one of his enemies, either his ex-wife, her lawyer, etc. would be, and this way he could easily perform a kill, while the members of the League of Smiles would attract Batman and the GCPD's attention. Check the Merrymaker and the League of Smiles out for yourself in 2013's Detective Comics Volume 2, number 16. Number 5. Zombie. Best known as an associate of Bane, Zombie was actually a pretty big reason behind Bane being able to become one of Gotham's best known criminals. He was once an assistant at the medical facility that gave Bane his abilities, and he then aided Bane in escaping prison, and was the one who found a way for Bane to get his daily dose of venom. Shortly after Bird's encounter with Batman, Bane defeated the Dark Knight and his rise to power started. Bird, Trog, and Zombie started a rampage over the city to eliminate competition and recruit more members to Bane's crime empire, as they were commanded by their boss, of course. Bird, Trog, and Zombie were sent by Bane to verify the supposed threat of a new Batman, and the 3 of them were brutally defeated by the new Dark Knight. They were arrested and locked away by the police, and each of them were interrogated about Bane's activities, but None of them revealed anything because they are good henchmen. They did eventually break out of prison, but it didn't take too long for them to end up back there. Check out Zombie in his first appearance in 1993's Batman Vengeance of Bane, number 1. Number 4, Mr. Camera. Called Mr. Camera for obvious reasons because of the camera lens helmet he used to wear on his crimes, and also because he employed all sorts of photographic devices on his criminal raids. Used to record his crimes, and on one very special day, he actually managed to get some footage of Batman and Robin in their secret identities. Although he was captured that same day because, you know, Batman and Robin really didn't want that information to get out, he did manage to hide the tape, hoping to use it eventually against the dynamic duo. Not too long after, Batman and Robin found the tape and discovered that the footage was actually too obscure to even see anything, which meant that their secret had never actually been exposed and that they had nothing to worry about at all. This particular version of Mr. Camera was unfortunately erased from the DC Comics history after Crisis on Infinite Earths, but there have been some one-off appearances in recent years of this character. Check him out for yourselves, starting with 1954's Batman number 81. Number 3, Lockup. Lyle Bolton, aka Lockup, is another non-powered villain who specialized in incarceration, high-tech security weapons, and escapology. He was first seen capturing the criminals Charaxus and Maxwell Veazey, but decided that these minor villains were too easy for him and went for the big guns in the form of Two-Face, who he successfully captured and took back to his private prison. He is eventually stopped by the police while targeting a criminal turned state evidence and is revealed to be Lyle Bolton, who was previously discharged from the police academy for being too gung-ho and dismissed from several security jobs. Later during the events of No Man's Land, having taken control of Blackgate Prison in the aftermath of the Cataclysm, he enlisted the KG Beast and the Trigger Twins to act as the wardens for his prison and ruled with an iron fist, but Batman tolerated his presence because he required Lockup to keep captured criminals in check to prevent Gotham from being overrun with them. Lockup was kept under strict orders to treat the prisoners well, and then towards the end of the event, Batman enlisted Nightwing's help to overthrow Lockup so Blackgate could be used by the lawful authorities once again. Check him out in his first appearance in 1996's Robin Volume 2, number 24. Number 2, Johnny Stitches. A Gotham City underboss for the Intergang, Johnny Donetto worked for Tobias Wales until he was caught stealing from him and was subjected to some pretty serious torture and mutilation, and just straight up thrown out of a window to die in an alley. Thankfully, he was found by Bruno Mannheim, who thought that Johnny had some potential, and he had Desaad fix him and stitch him up as best he could. Now operating under the name Johnny Stitches, he worked aggressively to remove the remaining large criminals in Gotham after the deportations of all supervillains from Earth. With his newfound power over people, Stitches used the Iceberg Lounge as a meeting place for Intergang and would eventually cause Penguin some pretty big trouble with the various vigilantes of the city. After Batman's sudden disappearance, Stitches organized a wager in Intergang's HQ, but they were interrupted by Vigilante, who broke into the place and challenged Stitches with the intention of killing him. Arming himself with a knife, Stitches was about to start his attack, but Vigilante was suddenly attacked by an invisible person that pushed him out of the building. Check him out in 2008's Gotham Underground, number 3. Number 1, Film Freak II. Known only as Edison, this man is the second Film Freak, a disturbed cinephile who had a strange obsession with Catwoman, and ran a late-night WUAB TV Studios operated show displaying amateur film clips made by his underlings. After obtaining footage from one of his henchmen showing Selina Kyle and Holly both wearing their Catwoman suits, he poisoned his goons, citing Alfred Hitchcock's Suspicion, in order to not let him divulge the information. He later deduced the real Catwoman, Selina, was hiding in Gotham City under the pseudonym of Irina Dubrovna, the main character of Val Lewton's 1942 film Cat People. He, along with Angleman, broke into Selina's apartment and threatened her infant daughter Helena. Eventually, due to Film Freak's obsession with shots and filming, she was able to incapacitate both of them, thankfully. She also asked her friend Zatanna to wipe her identity from their minds, similar to what she had done earlier with Dr. Light, and made them confess to their crimes to the authorities. Fast forward a bit, and in his final act of villainy, we see him manage to get his hands on an atom bomb, paying homage to Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, and while citing Network, announced on live TV that all Gothamites would have had their lives saved if they were able to solve a film-themed riddle. However, after shooting a movie critic that he employed to deliver the uranium for the bomb, Film Freak was finally defeated by Catwoman, who also managed to defuse the bomb.
Number 10 becomes heroes. And I'm not just talking about Moon Knight here. You see, there was a time Moon Knight was actually a part of the Avengers. Well, the Secret Avengers. But still, afterwards in his own 2011 series, he decided to go off to LA. Moon Knight actually ended up turning his life into a television series, or, well, his early life. But while that was going on, he was called back into action by some of his fellow Avengers, who said they needed his help with something. Problem was, the Avengers who appeared to be here weren't actually there. Instead, it was revealed that they were hallucinations of Moon Knights who actually also ended up becoming them in a way. They became personas that manifested within him, and which he at times adopted himself, fighting and actually acting under the guise and mantle of those heroes. The heroes that he imagined and which became a fractured part of his psyche were Captain America, Wolverine, and Spider-Man. Number 9. Death. That first death of Mark Spector in both versions is a quite disturbing scene. The story goes that after being betrayed by Raul Bushman and defending Marlene Alraine, daughter of archaeologist Peter Alraine, whom Bushman had killed, Mark was seemingly left dead in the desert. He was brought in to rest under the idol of Khonshu inside, or perhaps in front, of an ancient tomb. Despite being declared dead with no discernible pulse or heartbeat, somehow Mark made a miraculous recovery, and it is heavily implied in that first telling of the tale in issue number 1 of the 1980 Moon Knight series that his recovery is actually thanks to the spiritual and supernatural. In the 2016 series retelling of this moment, Khonshu actually speaks directly to Mark and offers him life or death. When Mark chooses life, Khonshu then reveals that as a result of his gift, Mark will actually act as his hands, his eyes, his vengeance. Very eerie stuff. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more Moon Knight lists, you know that there is much more to talk about. Be sure to let us know and we will give that to you. Hit that like button, friends. Do it. Number 8. Unkillable Moon Knight. One of the scariest things about Moon Knight in general as a character is that he's so completely relentless and seemingly unstoppable. It makes you question if he's really human and sometimes if he's even real. Moon Knight has at times questioned whether or not Khonshu is real or a hallucination, and he's also wrestled with the personas residing within him as he tries to navigate the truth about who he is as a person. There was also a time that he even claimed he wasn't real, messing with the minds of readers and opponents alike. In issue number 2 of the 2014 Moon Knight series, Moon Knight is chasing down an opponent, being fired at continuously as he pursues. While he is grazed by one of the bullets, he also seems to impossibly dodge them otherwise, and this is as his enemy empties his clips right into him, pulling out a series of guns in an effort to hit and take out Moon Knight. The man he's after asks, "Why can't I hit you?" To which Mark replies, "I'm not real."
In its 7, Dead Zone. There are a few characters more 90s than Dead Zone, but he has his appeal. Dead Zone sort of emulates the classic Iron Man villain Whiplash with his electrical whips, but he's less a mercenary than just an ideological warrior. He seeks to punish sinners by lashing them to death. That has him run afoul with Moon Knight. Dead Zone first appeared in Moon Knight's solo title and is pretty evenly matched for the character. When Moon Knight tried to take him down with his adamantium, Dead Zone catches it and then turns it around on him. There is very little on the wiki about him, and honestly I don't know what else I could say about him, but he's trying to do what Moon Knight does, but going about it in an absolutely abysmal way. Like, come on bro, really? Whips? Like, I get that they're OP in like the Spider-Man PS4 game, but seem seriously underpowered in real life or in comic books, unless they need them for plot or you're into that kind of thing.
Number 6. Facing Morpheus. Morpheus, once known as Robert Markham, was a patient of Peter Alraine's, not to be confused with the other Peter Alraine Sr., who's Marlene's dad. This Peter Alraine is Peter Alraine Jr., who is Marlene's brother. Robert himself was struggling with a viral infection which affected his very DNA, and decided to seek medical treatment. After Peter prescribed him an experimental drug, he became mutated. His appearance changed to something quite monstrous, and he found himself unable to sleep, and he also had powers. His powers were mainly psionic and also allowed him to control and interact with dreams of those who slept. At one point he also managed to be able to exert control over minds that were awake as well. This monstrous being proved a challenging foe for Moon Knight to face, and just the idea and appearance of him could haunt you in a lingering way. Kinda like how a horror film does. Number 5. The Truth. The Truth became a follower of Ernst, but even though he was not the leader of this group and Ernst intended to use him as a pawn, the Truth definitely had more raw power in comparison, hence why Ernst saw him as being so valuable. The Truth is a newer Moon Knight villain who first appeared in Legacy numbered issue 189 of Moon Knight. While we don't know much about his past, he is a villain whose powers allow him to basically expose the perversion of humanity to those around him or those he touches, showing them the truth, or a version of the truth. They see a twisted version of the truth, which can then corrupt their mind and can also make their face basically bleed, potentially even killing them if exposed for too long. I mean, you only have so much blood in you. Ernst had hoped to use Truth's power on a global scale, and Truth believed in Ernst's story and beliefs, even after Ernst was gone. However, Truth's powers appeared to be unable to infect the minds of those who are mentally unstable, which meant that Moon Knight could resist his influence and ultimately ended up defeating him. Number 4. Branding. And not in a marketing way. Well, I guess it's kind of a form of marketing, actually. Really disturbing form of marketing, perhaps. This revelation comes to us from the 2006 volume of Moon Knight, which is a lot more edgelordy from what I've seen of it personally. Here, Moon Knight takes to marking his victims by carving a crescent moon into their forehead. Reminiscent of DCEU Batman, branding his criminals with the bat symbol, but a lot more gruesome, because you're literally carving something into their forehead. This really showcases how Moon Knight uses fear and intimidation to fight against criminals, and also feels that he is so in the right that he gets to decide who should live or die, or be like permanently branded. This is definitely a version of the character, or more a time in Moon Knight's life, where he really didn't seem to care about killing. I mean, I know Moon Knight kills when he needs to kill, but there's pretty much no remorse shown here either. And usually Moon Knight does kind of try to not kill when he can. To see Moon Knight mark people's foreheads with crescent moons, check out issue 16 of the 2006 Moon Knight series, where he does quite a bit of it. It's pretty dark. Number 3. Moonshade. Moonshade is Moon Knight's own evil doppelganger who was created by Magus during the Infinity War event in the comics. Moonshade, like the other evil dopps of superheroes, was created by Magus. While we didn't get to see the full extent of his powers, he was able to reach out across the multiverse after absorbing some of Franklin Richards' power with the help of Franklin Richards' own evil doppelganger. He attempted to drain the life force energy of all the Moon Knights from across the multiverse, but in the end was defeated by a Moon Knight and Moon Knight Alt team-up, although not before he successfully drained many alternate Moon Knights of their life force energy, proving just how dangerous he really was. Number 2. Dark Secrets. Probably the moment that resulted in Mark developing a dissociative identity order to begin with. This one comes from his childhood. Mark's father, Elias, emigrated from the United States when he was younger with his own mother in the hopes of escaping persecution for being Jewish. A family friend and rabbi joined them and assisted them along the way by the name of Yitz Perlman. The problem was that Yitz Perlman wasn't really Yitz Perlman at all, but a man impersonating him who had deserted the German World War II forces and was also looking to escape himself. The fake Perlman, it turned out, was actually named Ernst, and was also a serial killer who preyed on Jews specifically, or more enjoyed that. That was more the thing that he liked the best. Which young Mark one day happened to find out by accident. He managed to escape Perlman's clutches, only for Perlman to disappear afterward, once more escaping justice. Number 1. Face Off. If you're familiar with Moon Knight and Mark Spector, then you know that Raoul Bushman is one of his greatest enemies in the comics. Bushman in the comics is the one who basically is responsible for Mark becoming Moon Knight in the first place. At least, that's how it initially went. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was added after, but initially, he was a big part of that. He was the one who seemingly killed Spector, who was then laid to rest beneath an idol of Khonshu and miraculously recovered, becoming his avatar. This was after Bushman betrayed the group that he and Mark were both a part of, looking to take the riches of one of their expeditions for himself, and threatening the life of the woman whom Mark would later fall in love with after killing her father. At one point, Raoul and Moon Knight face off against one another in a brutal fight, where despite getting both of his knees shattered, Moon Knight still managed to defeat Bushman, and even removes his face using one of his crescent moon darts. What are some of your favorite terrifying moments from the Moon Knight comics and from his life story in general?
Number 10. Wacky Man. Although not inherently evil, this unnamed clown of a man is still considered to be an Aquaman villain. Wacky Man was a clown that used robotic versions of aquatic creatures in his act, and because of that he decided to model his costume after Aquaman's. He was actually a pretty decent clown, bringing in people from all over to see his act. However, this wasn't always the best thing because he eventually caught the attention of some pirates who kidnapped him and forced him to use his robotic sea creatures to not only commit crimes, but to go after the real Aquaman. He proved to be someone who was not truly evil though, because once freed from the pirates, he teamed up with Aquaman to take them down. Check him out in his only appearance in 1957's Adventure Comics number 233, and let me know in the comments below if you think he truly deserves to be considered a villain for that. Number 9. Clownfish. Sidney Allard was once a doctor with a pretty shady practice. He was killing his elderly patients and just covering it up as much as he could. After part of San Diego sank, Allard was recruited by Black Manta and was tasked with taking blood samples of every resident in now Sub Diego. This included Aquaman, Aquagirl, and Cal Durham. After those three were rescued, Allard slipped away seamlessly and started looting a room full of chemicals. However, he stumbled a little bit and ended up breaking a vial that contained a strain of the Joker toxin. Engulfed in the toxin, Allard completely lost his sanity, took inspiration from a fish in a bowl, and colored his entire body purple and yellow, and then from then on dubbed himself the Clownfish. He then decided to break into Kaldur'ahm's home and shoot his partner Kaisha Salton with a mini harpoon, and then strapped a bomb to her torso. Obviously, Aquaman arrived on the scene to save Kaisha, but Allard seemed to be prepared for that because he was somehow able to make Aquaman take a truth serum drug so that he could find a way to get rid of him for good. Thankfully, Aquaman was able to sober up before he answered any questions though. Having failed, Allard pushes the trigger for the bomb, however it's revealed that the one strapped to Kaisha was a fake, and the real one was hidden under the couch. Now everyone was saved by Aquaman before the explosion, and Clownfish made a clean getaway. Check out his story for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 2007's Aquaman Sword of Atlantis. Number 8. The Awesome Threesome. Known together as the Awesome Threesome, Torpedo Man, Claw, and Magneto, but not the one that you're thinking of, were a team of robotic villains who went up against Aquaman and his Aqua family. Debuting in 1967's Aquaman Volume 1 number 36, this villainous team was telepathically summoned to attack a science hall, but it turns out they picked the wrong day to do it though, because Aquaman, Mera, Aqualad, and Aquababy were all visiting the pavilion and sprung into action the moment they heard all the commotion. Magneto destroyed the Gyromoleculizer, which was trapping a convicted alien on Earth for 5,000 years. With the moleculizer destroyed, the alien was free to escape and released his control on the robots. The threesome was apprehended quickly, however the alien escaped to Atlantis and began causing some serious damage to the city. It was able to then make a quick getaway thanks to a flying saucer, and once away it then released its mind control from the three robots once again, and they were back to their old villainous selves. Check out this robotic team of villains for yourself in their first appearance in 1967's Aquaman Volume 1, number 36. Number 7. Fisherman. An international criminal who started off as a thief who would steal anything he could get his hands on and sell them to the highest bidder. He came in contact with Aquaman after stealing a formula that could enlarge any living matter, and ever since then, the two have been enemies. Fast forward a little bit and we see the Fisherman clash with Aquaman on multiple occasions, each time ending in his defeat, and he eventually takes up residence in the villain-friendly country of Zandia. That was, however, just the first iteration of the Fisherman, however, because there have been a few Fishermen over the years, and that's because he is actually a parasite that takes over a host and forces them to commit crimes and do his bidding. The second iteration attacked the Gotham police during the Infinite Crisis alongside Scavenger, Red Pansy, and Riddler, and was shot down by Marcus Driver. And the third was actually just an imposter fisherman that was revealed to be a xenoform parasite that controlled its host using fear. Take a look at this character for yourself, starting with their first appearance in 1965's Aquaman, number 21. Number 6. Human Flying Fish. One day, way back in the day, Victor Bragg and Dr. Krill saw Aquaman using his fish telepathy to catch a bunch of baddies. Krill turned to Bragg and convinced him to undergo a special operation to turn him into a human flying fish, because Krill believed that Aquaman would not be able to stop him from that. With his newfound abilities of enhanced speed, flight, and ability to breathe underwater, Bragg was able to outperform Aquaman and escape on every mission he was sent out on. It took a little bit, but Aquaman was eventually able to figure out Bragg's tactics and devise a plan to trap him. Luring him in with a rumor of a bounty of uranium that was somewhere lost at sea, he took the bait and attempted to find it. The human flying fish was then taken out by Aquaman using electric eels, and he alongside Dr. Krill were arrested and taken away. Bragg was later seen as a criminal for hire, but was taken out rather quickly by Joseph Curry, the new Aquaman, and honestly hasn't really been seen since. Take a look at his story for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1960's Adventure Comics number 272. Number 5. Animal Master. Gustav was just once a regular old animal trainer who made a pretty decent living traveling the world as a circus performer. Like many other performers though, fame and fortune started to get to his head, and it got to a point where he began training his animals to commit crimes for him. Having been able to escape the cops on most heists, he began to get cocky and decided to escape by boat, and then this allowed Aquaman to enter the scene. However, he wasn't able to catch him this time around. This was both a blessing in disguise and a curse for Gustav, because although he escaped, a terrible storm hit the area and completely destroyed his boat. Presumed to be dead by everyone including Aquaman, Gustav was actually very much alive, and had found his way to a desert island where he tirelessly trained the animals he found on the island so he could enact his revenge on Aquaman. He was eventually able to lure Aquaman to his island, but he couldn't beat him, and that ended in his arrest. Check out Animal Master for yourself in his first appearance in 1959's Adventure Comics number 261. Number 4. Laren. Residing in the realm known as Dimension Aqua, Laren possesses pretty much all the powers you would expect from Aquaman, just toned down a fair amount. Long ago, he led a revolt against the Queen Mera and forced her to flee to Earth, which is kind of a good thing because that's where she met Aquaman. Laren ended up following her and was able to capture Aquaman and Aqualad and brought them back to Dimension Aqua as prisoners. Thankfully, Aquaman was able to figure out a plan of action pretty quickly, and he alongside Mera and the rest were able to escape back to Atlantis, which just solidified Laren's position as the new ruler of the Dimension Aqua. A few years later, Mera ended up returning to Dimension Aqua and had discovered that Laren had gotten rid of all of her tools and tossed them into the Great Pit. This forced her to go toe-to-toe with Laren, and she was able to overpower him, shattering his mind in the process, leaving him completely and utterly useless. If you feel like it, give this villain's story a read for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1963's Aquaman, number 11. Number 3, Captain Demo. Although his real identity is unknown, Captain Demo is a high-tech underwater pirate whose crew specializes in using very deadly and very experimental weaponry. Demo drives a fully functioning 16th century pirate ship that somehow works perfectly underwater, and of course when you drive a 16th century ship, you have to dress the part. It's also not really explained how, but he and his crew are able to breathe perfectly underwater without the need for scuba gear or anything like that. Deciding one day to conquer Atlantis, he managed to rig the entire city to explode unless Aquaman submitted to him, to which he complied and ended up doing some truly terrible things. When he finally got the chance, Aquaman turned on Demo and knocked him out cold in a one-on-one fist fight. Toppo the Octopus also helped out, and he took out the majority of Demo's men. However, enough of them were able to band together and rescue their captain so that they could live to fight another day. Check out Captain Demo for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1975's Adventure Comics, number 441. Number 2, Scavenger. Peter Mortimer was a deep-sea diver and pirate who dubbed himself the Scavenger because, you know, he scavenges. With no real powers, he operated an advanced submersible vessel called the Scorpion Ship and plundered the seas. Hearing rumors of an alien artifact called the Time Decelerator, Mortimer traveled to Atlantis and confronted Aquaman about it because he believed that it was capable of making him immortal. He kidnapped Mera and Aqua Baby and poisoned the water in Atlantis, forcing Aquaman to help him find this new mysterious device. Funnily enough, he actually did end up finding the device, however, upon activating it, it regressed him in age until he stopped existing completely, forcing him to live in a limbo-like state for many years. He eventually was able to somehow make it back to his original age and size, and teamed up with Cobra for a while upon his return. Scavenger is later seen to have reformed and even becomes friends with Aquaman. Their last battle was over stolen cargo that turned out to be vaccines. Mortimer's conscience got the better of him and he was treated like a hero for the very first time as he helped deliver them safely. Aquaman helped him clean up his act and he even became a business owner. There's a little bit more to the story that gets just, you know, a little bit risque, so if you're feeling up to it, I'll let you check that out for yourself. So give his story a read, starting with his first appearance in 1968's Aquaman, number 37. And number 1, King Pomoxis. One of the many corrupt Atlanteans, Pomoxis was one of just the worst, conspiring to straight up eliminate Aquaman for being the chosen hero. Pomoxis summoned Aquaman back to Poseidonis under the pretext of investigating a series of bizarre explosions taking place just outside the city. When the two went to investigate, Pomoxis pushed Aquaman into the path of a spiraling vortex, sending him backwards through time like 2,500 years. Returning to Atlantis, Pomoxis assumed Aquaman's appearance and identity, and told everyone that the real Pomoxis died in the explosions. With Aquaman's reputation, he was able to do pretty much anything and everything. However, he was eventually taken down by the real Aquaman after he returned to the present alongside Aqualad. A short time later, Pomoxis conspired with a pirate named Captain Clay, and together they lured a pack of sea monsters to attack Atlantis. While Aquaman and Aqualad were distracted trying to keep the monsters away from the populated areas, Pomoxis took advantage of the situation and staged a coup against the Atlantean king Stamar. His first official act as the newly crowned king was to imprison Aquaman and Aqualad. However, that did not last long because our heroes were able to dethrone him and just take him down. Check out his 4-issue run for yourself, starting with 1962's Aquaman, number 3. Number 10, The Demons 3. The Demons 3 are the demon brothers that ruled the galaxy 1 billion years ago until they were banished by the Timeless Ones. Felix Faust summoned their power using a bell, a wheel, and a jar that they had created for this purpose, only to be foiled by the League. They later worked with Neron against the League, trying to bring the moon down upon Earth, and then skip ahead to the 25th century and we see the Demons 3 released from their prisons once more. And they battled the heroes of this time period only to be stopped by Zatanna's magic that was actually attached to the jar, bell, and wheel that they were imprisoned in. Skip ahead once more to the 30th century and they are once again freed and become the pawns of Mordru the Magician. They were all pretty easily defeated though, with two of them battling it out to their mutual obliteration, and then the superheroes are able to combine forces to overcome the surviving Ghast, who is imprisoned by Dr. Fate in the reconstructed JLA satellite. Check them out in 1962's Justice League of America, number 10. Number 9, Royal Flush Gang. Originally set up by Amos Fortune, who we will talk about just a little bit later, the Royal Flush Gang was a gang consisting of the Ace of Clubs, King of Clubs, Queen of Clubs, Jack of Clubs, and the 10 of Clubs. They committed petty thefts of valuables and technology or were hired out of their skills for others' gain, but they were stopped by the League every single time. A second gang was set up by Hector Hammond and came closer than the original gang to defeating the Justice League. After their original Ace and Android was destroyed, Fortune took over the gang and killed all the members of the first gang except for the Jack of Clubs. As time went on, the gang grew and eventually got to the point where Fortune introduced the Heart and Diamond suits as well. The face cards would still be the most senior with the role of Ace, usually but not always as the Muscle, either Android or human, and then the 10s control the minor members or the Pips. These henchmen could gain or lose Pips depending on their performance, with rivalry amongst them was not too common though. Check them out for yourself to start learning more about them in 1966's Justice League of America, number 43. Number 8, The Maestro. Payne Cardine was once a musician who ended up turning to crime after he received some pretty bad reviews on his performances. Now, as somewhat of a musician myself, I can understand why that would make you upset, but like, come on, that seems just a little bit extreme. Using music as his main motif, Cardine adopted the costumed identity of the Maestro, a criminal who left clues in the form of music for his next crimes. In 1962, Justice League of America number 16, we see him using a music gang equipped with musical instruments that compel those in earshot to dance. The Maestro tried to defeat the Justice League by encasing them in indestructible bubbles. Cardine was eventually captured by Batman and Robin, who were assisted by a professional in musicology, and he was sent to prison and his musical crime spree was stopped for good. Why not check out this musical madman for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1962's Batman number 149. Number 7, Weapons Master. A criminal from the 120th century, Zotar the Weapons Master is a highly intelligent supervillain who is an expert in all weapons from the future and an enemy to the Justice League. He went back in time with a cache of weapons to battle the League, believing that the one to defeat them would be invincible and able to batter the Intersolar Police, due to a book written by Wonder Woman herself which seemed to indicate that he was the one who defeated the League. Obviously he was defeated and was sent back to his time period where he went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out a weapon that would actually defeat them. Since then, he has returned to plague other incarnations of the League on several occasions, like when he tried to obtain Green Lantern's power ring, or when he was the leader of a cult that worshipped the League, although he has been defeated each time. Check him out for yourself, starting with 1980's The Brave and the Bold, number 29. Number 6, Saturna. Known as the Lord of Misrule, Saturna was an intergalactic warlord who took control of countless worlds, with few being able to oppose him. He had conquered many planets including Moss Steel and was nearing victory on Terra Arcana. However, he didn't realize that the two of his top lieutenants, Simon Magus and T'Zala, were stealing and dealing behind his back, selling off conquered planets to a human property development firm. Needless to say, he was not too happy about that one bit. I'll admit that Saturna was a bit of a showman and spent more time honing his public image than actually focusing on subduing his conquests. He was defeated and killed by the Creature Commandos, who was eventually killed by T'Zala when he was no longer of use to her. Give his story a read for yourself, starting with his first appearance in 1961's Justice League of America number 2, all the way until his death in 2000's Creature Commandos number 8. Number 5, Amos Fortune. A persistent villain to say the least, this Justice League baddie used several luck-based ploys like the Royal Flush Gang, the Luck League, and the Tarot Gang to get ahead. As a kid, Amos was the leader of a gang of juvenile delinquents, and then as an adult he became obsessed with luck, both good and bad, and discovered the existence of luck glands that dictate how a person's luck will run. After learning how to control these luck glands to manipulate his luck, he gathered his old gang and created the original Royal Flush Gang, who battled the Justice League on multiple occasions. Fortune first met the Justice League while trying to remove their good luck, but he was quickly defeated. He later set up the Royal Flush Gang once again, making major profits by working with Roulette and her gambling operations. After the Justice League foiled his operation, Fortune managed to get away pretty easily as he escaped to a riverboat on the Mississippi, where he was then shot at close range by a widow of a discarded card, the Two of Clubs. Check out his story starting with 1961's Justice League of America, number 6. Number 4, Epoch, Lord of Time. A powerful being from the year 3786, Epoch the Lord of Time goes head to head with the Justice League of America using his Chrono Cube to peel back the 4th dimensional veil of time. Since his initial defeat by the JLA, this fugitive from the future learned how to move laterally and diagonally through history, accessing armies and weapons spanning across millions of years. His greatest desire was to conquer space and time, and to make sure his bid to rule all reality was successful, he sought out to eliminate the Justice League's ancestors, erasing them completely from existence, which he was more than capable of doing. At some point, the Lord of Time created a frozen moment in history called Time Point, and he eventually evolved into the being known as Epoch, who wanted to master the time stream, changing events to grant him power. Epoch seemingly died in the JLA Wildcats crossover, however he did return once again as the Lord of Time in the Brave and the Bold series. Give his story a read starting with 1962's Justice League of America, number 10. Number 3. The Key. No one knows the real name of this villain, but we do know that he was originally a chemist with Intergang, obsessed with unlocking the secrets of the physical world and the human mind. To this end, he has augmented himself with chemical cocktails, boosting his baseline cognitive abilities into the superhuman range. A common opponent of the members of the Justice League of America, the Key will never be satisfied until he has picked the contents of their minds apart and cleared a path to total global domination. Although all his attempts to take down the JLA failed, that never stopped him from trying. At one point, he manages to infiltrate the JLA's headquarters and traps the team in a fantasy realm of their own creation, intending to siphon off all of the energies of their inevitable victory in order to increase his power. He almost succeeds if it were not for the intervention of Connor Hawke, who beams up to the JLA headquarters while the Key is present due to a pre-arranged meeting to discuss him becoming a member of the League. He eventually returns to fight the Batman, attempting to provoke the Dark Knight into murdering him so he could escape life itself, but the plan proves unsuccessful. There's a whole lot more to this character, so why not check him out for yourself, starting with 1965 Justice League of America, number 41. Number 2. The Unimaginable. A being of immeasurable power that roamed the universe wielding its might for its own amusement. Bored with its existence, the Unimaginable left its native planet and traveled through space, exploring several other worlds and gathering various life forms along the way. Arriving on Earth, it saw the JLA in action and decided that it wanted to join the team. However, the Justice League refused the Unimaginable's demands, and the Unimaginable attacked, first with several of the alien creatures that had gathered, then in the body of one of them. The JLA defeated the Unimaginable both times and imprisoned it. Years later, the Unimaginable returned in outer space, battling the Green Lantern named Aaliyah, whom it had previously encountered and just wanted some revenge on. The Daxamite hero Valor saved Aaliyah and seemingly disintegrated the Unimaginable with a burst of laser vision. That was in the end though, because after being captured by LexCorp, it was contained in a chamber called Lockdown 6. The Unimaginable's capsule attracted the attention of Darkseid and the Akarans, the former wanting its power while the latter saw the dangers of it. The Unimaginable was freed from its prison, and its host, Dr. Bendorian, sought to transfer its energy to a new host, in which it was to be Maximum, who had been engineered by LexCorp to serve such a purpose. The Unimaginable succeeded, and Maximum inherited the power of a god. Have I caught your interest? Good. Check out this powerful energy being for yourself in 1966's Justice League of America, number 42. Number 1. Shaggy Man. Created by Professor Andrew Zargarian, the Shaggy Man is a synthetic being that proved time and time again that it was pretty much unstoppable, as it was capable of regenerating its destroyed body parts and was also just ridiculously strong. To defeat the virtually immortal Shaggy, the original Justice League of America obviously created a second Shaggy Man to battle the first, and the two just duke it out in an underground cavern where they remain buried for all of eternity. It was later revealed that Aquaman put the unconscious Shaggy Man in a capsule and placed him 20,000 feet below the surface of the ocean just for safety's sake. The Shaggy Man was later freed by Hector Hammond and transported to the Justice League satellite. This time it was Green Lantern who succeeded in defeating him by using his power ring to shrink the monster to a miniature size and imprisoning him. Fast forward a bit and the Shaggy Man popped up in Arizona, where the Green Lantern just straight up dropped a mountain on him. Soon after, the town of Justice was built around the mountain, and eventually the Shaggy Man broke free of his mountain prison. The Justice League defeated him after learning from his creator, Professor Zargarian, that the Shaggy Man's fur was a fiber optic conduit for energy created by photosynthesis. The Justice League managed to shave him and dump him on the dark side of the moon before his hair could grow back, and well, that was that. Check him out for yourself, starting with 1966's Justice League of America.